Fire. Real mystery to early man. Nobody knows how anybody learned to make it work. We started with lightning, volcanic action, don't know what. Some people say you can make it by rubbing sticks together. You don't really believe that that would happen, do you? I'm sure man's tried all kinds of methods over the years. Well, we're going to show you here in the next few minutes how you actually can take two sticks, and by knowing what you're doing, rub them together and be able to make your fire. Here we are. Fire by friction. This is how we create this fire. Anybody can build a fire using matches or a Zippo and a gallon of gas. When we go into the field or into the bush, we want to learn how to make fire by rubbing sticks together. It can be done. We've got a book on our shelf in the house written by some great Canadian outdoorsmen in the 30s or 20s. He's talking about fire by friction. He says, well, yes, it can be done, but you need to bake the materials in an oven, and it takes days of drying before you can do it. Well, that's poppycock. We've gone out the day after a rain or days when it's been misting, and with groups teamed up and made fire by rubbing sticks together. It can be done, so don't let anyone tell you that it can't. Here we're going to show you a few methods of doing this. And when we're rubbing sticks, it's not rubbing this way or this way. It's a controlled rubbing of the sticks. There is a method which we'll hope to get into a little bit later. It comes from the Philippines, which involves bamboo, which isn't available here in the Americas, of sawing that creates. It's a friction fire. There's a method of making fire called a plow by rubbing two sticks together this way and creating dust, and that does work. We're not going to do that. What we're going to work on is our two methods of friction fire primarily used around the world. One is the bow drill, which requires several pieces of equipment to make it work. The principles are the same. You have a depression in your fireboard here, a heart, and you have a drill, and what you do is you spin. You don't rub it. You spin the drill onto the heart. You have a notch that collects a material, a dust that is formed. That dust collects in this notch, and when enough friction is reached and temperature is high enough, a spark is formed. That spark is like a tip of a cigarette. This we will turn into a flame. We take that spark and we pick it up and we put it in what we call a bird's nest, which is a bundle of finely shredded bark, of grasses, anything which has a low flammable rate. It'll burst into flame pretty quick. It has lots of airspace in it, so the oxygen can reach in. And you put your coal inside this, and then you blow on it. And what happens is you create a flame. Well and good, you've made a fire. Now what? If you are not prepared, having everything in line, your fire is going to fizzle out. So you will have gathered some very fine tinder. These are dried tiny branches off of trees or large stems of grass or broken up pieces of heavier weed. You lay that on top of your tinder bundle with a flame and you blow on it harder and harder and the flames will come up through and they'll catch this stuff, your finer kindling. Then you're almost established, but this isn't going to last but a few seconds. Then you have prepared a larger batch of kindling, finger size. You lay this on top, and it's magic. You'll see it here in a few minutes. Poof, you've got a fire. When we reach this stage, under most circumstances, we have got a fire. We're established. And from there, you end up and put your bigger logs on. Or you use this to heat your coffee water or whatever it is you're after. But those are the stages of building a fire. Now, when we work, we talk about rubbing sticks together. There are certain types of wood that we're looking for. We have a hearth and we have a drill in these methods that we're going to show you. Both are soft woods. We consider cottonwood as pretty much the cat's meow, the standard that you measure other woods from. Cottonwood works well as a drill, it works well as a hearth. They work well together, or you can intermix. This particular drill is not cottonwood, but it is yucca, the flower stem off of yucca. It works well. Here's a piece of mullein, which we'll utilize in hand drill. Works well. Sunflower stalks work well. Any soft, pithy type wood is generally soft. Soft enough to make a fire with. So we'll explain some of the materials, but mostly we want to explain to you the characteristics of what you're looking for when you build a fire. So we'll go pretty quick and we'll build a fire from start to finish. We'll show you the steps involved and explain a bit more about the types of woods used. What we're going to do first off is show you how to make a bow drill fire. We feel the bow drill really in ways is easier to make than the other method we'll show you later, the hand drill. But also in a primitive situation it's much harder because there's more components that you have to gather up. You need your hearth and drill, which we illustrated earlier and we'll show you in a moment we'll make. But one thing you need is a bow, which generally is pretty easy to find. Just any stick. It can be a broomstick type, or it can be a real limber stick, whatever. But something that creates a bow that you'll run the drill through. And then you need cordage. Well, here we're using nylon cord. But in a primitive situation, you've got to make cordage. And though you can make it generally tough enough to make a fire, there's 2 steps in making this fire with a bow drill. And so generally, the string doesn't make it through both steps. And so it's wise to make 2 pieces of cordage. So now you've got to find cordage material, and then you've got to take the extra time to make it. Well, time is usually not a problem with us. I don't like timed events. I like to have a result, a fire. This is all I'm interested in. So you've got to have a bow and a piece of string. Also, you need something which we call a bearing block. And this particular one is a rock with a hole or a depression in the middle that holds your drill. When we actually do our drilling, the top of the drill fits in the rock, and then we place that in our hand and bear down. And this can be pretty hard to find. It can be real difficult to find in a primitive situation. A lot of places you don't find rocks soft enough to peck a hole in like this was, or it's too granular or gritty, so it creates friction, and you're trying to reduce friction at this end. A seashell will work, but you generally don't find seashells or mussel shells or oyster shells. Sometimes you do along these creeks and sometimes you don't. Parts of bones will work. Caps off of knees and knuckle joints off of legs have little depressions, and sometimes off the spine you can find pieces of bone with slight depressions, and they'll work for a bearing block, but they're just not always there. A if I've got to carry that much stuff with me, I'll carry matches. That's just my way of looking at it. It's a real pain in the neck. Well, we'll show you how to make a bow drill fire first, which requires more coordination, more materials, but in essence is actually easier to make a fire. Now this is a piece of cottonwood limb, which we just broke off a tree or found on the ground, whichever. Well, the bark of cottonwood strips off and it will make pretty fine tinder nest. You can shred this up and make a pretty fine tinder nest to place that coal in that we're going to be making. The thing I don't like about cottonwood is it gets real coarse, and a lot of times it's so coarse that our spark will fall out the bottom. And you can correct this at times by shredding it and collecting the dust that forms and putting it into the center of it. That helps. Well, if I've got my druthers, I take real fine grasses, or this is stripped cedar bark, something that's a little bit more fibrous and will hold the coal better. You can just take a little bit of the fibrous and put it into the coarser nest of grass or cottonwood bark, and this will hold the coal and ignite and catch everything else for you. So cottonwood does carry its own tinder. Now this limb here, break her off. I'll take my knife, split it down, and what I'm creating is a fireboard. Now I'm going to take this fireboard and I'm going to take 2 steps before I make the fire. First I'm going to cut a depression into this. I'll lay this down here on my little working table surface. And I want the top as flat as I can to begin with. And then I'll cut a slight depression. Into my board. It doesn't need to be anything really fancy. Then I'll take my drill, which in this instance, the drill is a piece of yucca. It could be a smaller limb of cottonwood. Cottonwood limbs are a little difficult to find straight like this. Sometimes you can cut them out of part of the limb that your hearth came out of. But the outside of cottonwood is softer than the outside of yucca, and so the string has a tendency to wear into the outside of the cottonwood drill faster than it does the yucca, and then the drill doesn't spin. And if the drill is not spinning, we're not creating friction or making fire. Now what I need to do is point the end of the drill is going to fit into the bearing block. Now if I have just a little dimple in a rock, I would want a real fine point where I don't have just a little dimple. I've got a big round hole in the rock that I'm using, so I can make it more of a rounded surface. Doesn't make much of a difference. Now I need to look down the drill. I need to ensure that it's straight. And not straight drill can work, but it can also create a lot of problems, and you don't need any more problems when it comes to making fire. This one is reasonably straight. It's got a very slight curl off to one side, but it's not going to hurt anything. What I'll do is I'll take the tip of this drill and go all the way around it and point it, and then I'm going to take and reduce that point to more of a little nubbin. And it needs to be solid. You can't do this with some pithy woods. And sometimes the interior of yucca gives you some problem doing it. But if you can create that little point, that nubbin, and then that will fit into the depression that we've made. And it will actually drill a hole right through the board. So let me take all my materials, put them together, and when I put the drill into the string, notice that about this stage it starts to tighten up. Well, I don't want it overly tight. Some people really like it overly tight. I don't. I like mine so it just got some tension to the string, and then where my thumb and fingers of my right hand grip the drill, if you can see, I can squeeze my thumb and fingers together and take up tension. And so if I start getting some slippage of my string, I can compensate for it just simply by squeezing my thumb down. So, step number one on drilling, I need to drill a depression in the hole, in the board, to hold the drill. Now, if I had my board properly prepared, I could just about have fire at this stage. Note that my dust is accumulated around the top. What I want is that dust to accumulate in one spot. And when that happens, the dust will compact and form just a little ball, a place for a spark to form. So what I need to do is cut a notch. Oops, starting to fall apart. Or it may not going to work. We'll see. If everything goes right in the fire making deal, you don't learn anything. The more problems you have, the more you can learn. I might be able to compensate for that. Now I want my notch to go close to halfway, at least a third of the way, into my depression that I had started, my hole that I started to burn. Now you can see that. Well, I've lost a corner of my hole, so my drill has a real tendency to want to fly out that. This is the reason we cut the notch second instead of first. I used to make my notch in the depression at the same time and go down and make my fire, but I found with students a lot of times that the drill would kick out. And our friend Jim Riggs out in Oregon, he always starts it the way we're illustrating here, and we picked up on that right away. It just makes things easier. But now, since this piece of wood here is falling off, it gives me a weakening spot for that drill to fly out. Well, probably if I was smart I'd start over, but maybe I can show you something here additional. When I start my drilling down, I won't hold quite exactly straight where it might want to kick out. I'll tilt it slightly to try to retain it in there. And yet my dust should still form in this notch. Now, what happens when my dust forms here on this, well, not carpet, piece of buffalo rawhide, forms there, or on the ground? How do I transfer that to the tinder pile? This is a problem that you have to answer. And the easiest way to do it is to place something underneath. In this case, it's a strip of cottonwood bark. It could be a leaf, a thin sliver of wood, many different things. Okay, now we're about ready to make a fire. Now I want to make sure that I don't have anything to interfere with my bow when it gets to spinning back and forth. When I get to spinning that bow, I don't want it hitting this lump on the side. I want a good smooth, nothing to get in my way to impede me. Let's take our drill we've got started into the hole. And I want to point out my body position somewhat. Here I can zoom out on that camera just a little bit. You'll notice my shoulder, my knee, my wrist, and my drill and the hearth are all in one line. Now, downward pressure is crucial. The more downward pressure that you can apply, the better or the easier your fire is going to be made. It's a combination of the speed of the drill going plus the downward pressure that makes this all happen. The downward pressure outweighs the speed. You can speed like hell and get nothing if you don't have any downward pressure. You can spin slowly and have plenty of downward pressure and get your coal. I've got to go very gingerly now because of my problem I've got in that hearth. But I've locked my wrist tightly against my shin. When I lean forward, at times I'll even lock my elbow or my shoulder onto my knee. But I need to really make sure my left wrist, which is holding the drill, does not wobble. You can't hold that by itself. It has to be locked up against your leg. And then when I start to spin this, I'll start in little short jerks. A little bit of pressure. And then if I feel I'm gaining control, I'll take long sweeps of the drill. I'm applying a considerable amount of downward pressure. See the dust coming out, it's black, a lot of smoke. Smoke doesn't necessarily mean fire. Okay, now here's where a lot of people lose it. They just throw everything aside and stand up and the dust pile falls all over. And the coal, if it's there, is lost. We don't want that. We want to save this coal. I'll take my hand, put it on the board, the hearth, hold it tight, remove my foot. That dust, there's a good sized pile of dust there that we've created. We're going to let that last for, if we timed it, we could get probably 4 minutes out of this. Take a knife, fine pointed stick, separate it, push it down through your notch into the tinder holder or the coal holder, and then move your fireboard out of the way. There's a good coal, and it's ours. If the wind doesn't come up, the rain doesn't come down, the snow fall off the tree or whatever, we've got a coal. We don't have a fire yet. I do. You don't. Now what I'm going to do is transfer that to my tinder bundle, blow it to flames, and I'll build a fire here right for you to show you the sequence. Okay, let me pick the coal up, move my table out of the way. Let me transfer the dust, my coal, into my tinder bundle. Now I'll put my back up. How well you can show this, but the wind itself is doing some blowing. Oops, don't let it fall on you. You got a fire a long time ago. I'm just delaying it for you. We got a fire. Now what are we going to do with it? Like I said before, we've got our sticks prepared, they're ready. So, I'll lay the sticks on top, not really compressed together, but lightly. Let those catch. If that catches, I come on with slightly larger sticks. Hang them across. Don't compress it down too much. You need oxygen space around the sticks. we have just about an established fire. Go to our next size. Notice I'm laying them in there. This is more or less teepee fashion. The idea is to have plenty of oxygen space. You put too much on at one time, you'll lose it. So we have a fire. Really nothing to it if you know what you're doing, simple rules, and you're prepared. This is a mullein stalk. We use it quite often in our hand drills. It takes some preparation other than just pulling it up. The thing is, it grows straight. It's a natural weed. It grows from coast to coast. We haven't been hardly any place. Now notice the method that Jerry's using to cut this. You just don't want to slice it. What you do is you carve all the way around it. Score it. And then if you score it deep enough, it'll break off cleanly. If you try to cut it with a knife, it'll just shred. And you need a clean break to work in the fireboard. Now she'll look up the shaft, she'll find how far it goes straight. She'll reach up about 18 or 24 inches, and then she has to make that cut again. Now notice that she's holding that knife on her leg, her knuckles are tight against her leg, and she's turning the stalk into the knife. She's not pushing the knife into the stalk. So there's no slipperage, and she's not going to go and cut her leg off. Now she needs to clean the stalk, which is rather rough because your hands are going to be going up and down. Well, here you'll note the depression is not as pointed as the other one for the hand drill. Note that the mullein stalk is hollow, it's pithy. So she had to make the hole round the depression so that the stalk will fit in it. And she'll be able to start her hole without it slipping out. Now Jerry has started the hole, started the depression, and cut the notch in to fit the drill. And now she's going to go ahead and place it up and begin to make a hand drill fire. Show you every the steps that are involved. Now we get a position where we kneel on the board. But you notice how she's starting off gently, running her hand down the drill. She wants to constantly keep pressure down. If the drill ever kicks out, it cools stuff off. And so she's going down, she's warming it up. Pretty quick she's going to get hot, and she's going to really go. You've really got to squeeze your hands together. You got to really apply pressure down. You're using muscles you're not familiar having. Get your body over it. Spin. Downward pressure is more important than spinning. This will wear you out in a hurry. You'll find out what you're made of. You do some of this. You got plenty enough coal there now. Jerry, why don't you just pick it up and transfer it to a piece of bark or whatever you have to do. Just show people what you've got. You've got your coal. Just hold it for him. Hold it steady there. See, now we don't need to blow this up again. You've seen it blown up once, but there's the coal. Hand drill you'll find much easier in a primitive or a field situation because you have only to get the drill and the hearth. Now we'll show you one other way of using a hand drill which is even simpler. Now, as we said just a moment ago, there is an easier way to work with a hand drill. We had a very good friend of ours down in Oklahoma send us a little note one time and a description of a theory that he'd come up with, or a method that he'd come up with, that he said he'd never seen or read about any place before, which was simply tying a string to the top of the hand drill. In this case we used a clove hitch to tie it and hold it in place, and with thumb loops at the end of the strings where you can place your thumb in it. And what that does, it allows you to apply an extreme amount of downward pressure. Two things actually apply. One is every time you reach the bottom of the drill doing a normal hand drill, I'll illustrate here, like we did yesterday, every time we reach at the bottom point, see, the drill stops spinning momentarily while you change hands and go back to the top. See, and then as you go down, it stops, you go up. Well, this is eliminated. The string tied to the top is a big, big help. Another one, and cordage, you've seen in another part of our video, we're making a piece of cordage long enough to do that. It only takes a few minutes. But you've learned how to make buckskin. So if you make yourself a strip, 18, 20 inches long, slit some loopholes for your thumbs, a little wider towards the center, you have a device that you can just carry with you all the time. You can loop it on your belt or stick it in your pocket, and you have got a device that you can utilize for the hand drill. Now what we do is we take this, place approximately the center of the buckskin piece over the drill, put our thumbs through the loops. Now we're allowed to keep extreme downward pressure as we work. And that is the important part of fire making. A little bit less effort and we end up with a coal. Okay, I mentioned the bamboo fire saw earlier, and I'm going to show you the principles of how it works. Not necessarily because there's bamboo available for us here, but with some practice and just work and research, I think we can adapt local materials to the same process of what's happening with this. First thing you need to do is bamboo provides everything you need. Now, in our situation, if we used heavy mullein or some cottonwood or whatever we may use, we may have to adapt different materials. But this was shown to us by a good friend of ours, Mel DeWeese, out in Grand Junction, Colorado, probably one of the finer modern-day survival instructors around. And Lloyd Bigfoot, a good friend of his, who came by here one time. But what we need to do is cut a piece out of the bamboo. And what we'll end up with is, I'll cut this in a minute and show you, but this will be the saw. What we have cut out this piece is going to be the heart. Now, I'm going to take our knife, scrape off this outer junk, and then I'm going to scrape a handful of shavings. Place them in that little depression for a moment. This is going to be our tinder, our bird's nest. Again, in this case, created by the bamboo itself. Now, if we're going to experiment with other materials, you'll use what tinder material you can come up with. Now, let me stand up here and get in position, and we'll see if we can get some closer shots here to show you what exactly we're doing. Okay, here's the pile of tinder I scraped off. And then this piece here, which was cut out of the bamboo, is a separate piece. I've carved a notch in it, which you should be able to see from the side. And you can see that it just barely starts to go through the thickness of the bamboo. Well, this is going to fit over this lip, and we're going to saw on this. And the friction created is going to send the dust into here. Well, here's where we're going to place our bird's nest. Now we take a piece of bamboo, or in this case it's a strip of bark, and we place that lightly over the shavings so that we don't compress it too much. Then the dust is allowed to form inside of the notch. Now, one further step we have to do is we have to shave down the edge of the saw. Because if it's rounded shape, it won't saw in exactly the way we want it. And I'll show you a close-up of this on both sides here in a second. I'll show you what it is I've accomplished. Now generally, on a thinner wall bamboo like this, we can only get one fire per notch. Thicker walled stuff, you can get several. But we're fortunate to have gotten this from a friend of ours in North Carolina, and so we won't complain. Okay, you'll see where this edge here is more of a blunt. This I've shaved down to more of a V shape, so that when we place our notch on it and then briskly bring it back and forth, it'll be smoother and it'll go into it deeper. Now let's take our tinder, place that in there below the V. I've anchored the end of the bamboo into the ground. Now this takes a lot of pressure, and sometimes the bamboo fails underneath of it. Get everything lined up so I'm comfortable, and now I'm going to rub this. I can feel it starting to frictionize, so I'm going to speed up here pretty quick, and I won't be able to talk. Now I need oxygen. I still have smoke going. We'll have a coal. It looks like there is a puff of smoke every time I come down. Okay, folks. What we've done is we've created a coal in our bird's nest of shavings. That we would place into a tinder bundle or blow this alone. Into flame. Now the reason we really showed you this is because I believe that there's materials locally that can be used and combined to make this concept work. It doesn't need to be bamboo. I haven't taken the time to experiment with it. Possibly some of you will. Fire by friction. That was the secret. This fire is always special. It's not always as easy as what we just made it appear. It's a pretty elusive force. We treasure every one of them that we get. You realize that temperature today's got to be close to 100 degrees. We're out building fires. I think that's rather ridiculous. So I'm glad we're on to something a little bit less strenuous and not quite as hot. What we're going to do is we're going to talk about fibers and cordage, the art of making string, string and rope. What we've got, and we want to show you, is how you can go out and take this stuff, a weed to most people, and with a little bit of exertion on your part, turn it into this. You go into the wilderness, even in modern day, a piece of string is pretty invaluable. You think about it for a little bit. Go out with all your high-tech equipment, you've got something that's holding everything together. You've got string that's tying down tents, or string that's lashing your backpacks together, whether it's Velcro straps or whatever it may be. You got a belt that's holding your pants up. Well, we feel here that there's 4 primary important skills that one really has to be aware of to be really competent in the wilderness. And cordage is one of those. And cordage is really the simplest to learn. So we're going to spend some time here and we're going to show you what fibers are, where they are, how you can find them, how to prepare them, and what you can make them into. Whether you need something for sewing or a rope to hang an animal from, a deer, make a trap. There's just a million uses for a piece of string or a piece of rope, and we really hope to show you some of those to get you on the road to cordage making. Bowstrings, silk, hemp, and sinew. A bag may be made from fibers. A plant fiber string to carry your basket. Fibers can be used to net your own bag. Fish line, always a need for. There's just always a need for a raft of rope. Now we're going to show you some of our local materials that we work with, and now we're more interested in showing you characteristics, how to find your own cordage, not names so much, because names don't mean anything. So we're going to take a few minutes and cover some of those. What we like to do to test out fibers or plants to see if they have fibers is just exactly what you're saying. When we walk through the fields, I just have a real tendency to break off the top of various plants. Try to strip them out. See if they're pliable, if they have characteristics of fibers. How do they strip off the limb? Do they strip down easy, or do we have to work at it? There's a couple different ways of breaking fibers off, and we'll illustrate a few of those to you. Okay, this particular plant is stinging nettle.
Anyone who walks in the woods is usually familiar with the sting nettle. When it's green, it has little fibers, stingers, and you touch it and brush against it, and it burns. You know that you've touched it. Now with sting nettles, what you do, the best way to strip fibers off is from the top of the plant down towards the bottom. And you can see, like Jerry's doing, she holds her thumb of her right hand tight against the plant. And with her left hand, she's pulling the fiber down. Now, whenever you come to a node on the stem, a node is where a leaf has grown, you carefully pull the fiber off of it. It wants to break there, but you can keep it intact if you're careful. And it is best not to pull the whole thing at one time. You pull half the plant, and then you turn over and pull the other half of plant. Okay, sting nettles that we just did, as I said, we stripped the fibers from the small end to the big end. Now, this particular plant is velvet leaf or buttonweed. You find it wherever you go. We find it strips better from the big end down to the little end, if it's not rotten and doesn't fall apart. Okay, what Jerry's holding there is the, if you think of it, is the inside of a tree. It's the inside of the plant. It's a pith. And she can break it. It'll fall apart. You can see we've missed some fibers in stripping, but very few. What we have taken off, what we want, are the inside fibers. Okay, now what are we going to do with those? A lot of plants, which are the ones we just shown you, the fibers are on the outside of the plant. So what we have here is basically the outside bark of the tree, but there's an outer chaff connected to the fibers. And so we need to remove this chaff. And we can do that by rubbing it in our hands to break it up. We can rub it on our leg. Anything to break this up. You can make cord, you can make rope, you can make fibers, you can make wraps using just what you have there. Except you have extraneous material which adds no strength at all to your cord. So we're just cleaning it up here so that what we end up with is more just fibers. This is the same plant we were just stripping, and it's green, velvet leaf. Now, Jerry will show where we pull it out of the ground, and she'll cut off the bottom portion. Get that out of the way, the root. Split, that's a very, very tough plant, and it's tough to split, but what you want to do is begin separating the fibers off of 1/3 or 1/2 of the plant, whatever you can, and you can strip it up. You can use this green fiber as a lashing just like it is. We put a wiki up just a week ago at a demonstration and tied the whole thing in place with nothing but what you see her stripping off. It wasn't corded, it wasn't refined any further than what you see there. It's a pretty simple task to go out and pull a weed up once you understand what you're looking for. All right, just strip that off real quick. Put it on your leg and show them how you clean that. Notice that, now this is the same thing that we just cleaned, but now the chaff is all green. So what she's going to do is scrape off this extraneous chaff with her knife. It just gets us closest to the fibers that we're after. We want you to strip some threads off of that and show them just basically how that works. There's cordage material in the green. It may change some as it dries, but it will still be cordage. Now this particular plant is dogbane. Fibers are on the exterior, the same as what we've been working, but we have to extract them just slightly different. The fibers we've been working with, pretty well just grab one end and strip towards the other, being careful around nodes, and you get most, the majority of the fibers. But with dogbane, which gives us really, really fine silky fibers, what we have to do is break off short segments of the stalk. You're approximately an inch or inch and a half long, and then you rock them back and forth. Pull one way, pull the other way, pull it back the other, and it falls off. If you just try to strip the fiber down, you'll end up, the fibers will strip out and stay stuck to the stalk. It just doesn't separate the same way as the nettles and the velvet leaf that we've been working. Otherwise, once they're stripped out, you clean them the same as we have the rest. Now we've been showing more weeds than anything else. Barks of certain trees will work really well. Barks will either strip off a tree or they will not strip off a tree. This particular one is basswood. And it does strip really well and makes real fine cordage. Well, this is a tough time of year for stripping this bark, but springtime she strips easier. But you should be able to just grab a hold of one end and pull, and it should just pull right on up the tree. Go ahead and pull it away, Jerry, see what happens. Broke off at the joint. Okay, well, we got several good long strips out of that. Now here Jerry's going to be stripping the outer bark from the inner. Now the outer will still make good lashing. The inner is just a finer cording material. One thing about barks to remember is some barks you can use and they'll stay pliable after they've been stripped out. Some barks as they dry will become brittle. And so if you were to use them for something that was to be flexible, it would break. Basswood works well. It keeps its pliability. Okay, the outside bark, or the outer bark of the basswood that Jerry's got there, doesn't necessarily have to be discarded. You can still get some fibers out of it if you work, but it can be used as lashings as it is. Notice how pliable it is. You can lash stuff with it. You can make baskets with it. You don't necessarily have to get rid of it. There's always a use for it. It's just the inner, the closer to the inside of the tree, you get better fibers for actual cordage. Now stripping those fibers out, now that piece there is what Jerry's been working. All you need to do is split it with your thumbnail and then strip it out into threads. The yucca plant is pretty useful. You take the leaves of that, but with yucca leaves the fibers are on the inside rather than the outside. So you scrape off the outside of it, or what you can do is you can pound it to loosen the outside fibers, breaking them up, and then soak the leaves anywhere from 2 to 4 to 6 weeks in water. It will become stagnant and smell like a sewer, but it will sure give you some clean fibers. These fibers are yucca and they have been retted. Makes some fantastic and good and tough cordage. Up to now we've been working with plant fibers. Animals provide a lot of material for cordage. This is wool from sheep. This also is wool from buffalo. Hair from horses' manes will work. You can use wool off most of your fur-bearing animals. The outside of the deer, the skin, is rawhide, makes an excellent cording material. What we do is we cut it into a spiral, a 1/4 of an inch or so wide, and to make longer lengths. And for best results, it really needs to be soaked. Doesn't take very much to make a real strong cord by itself without doing anything further to it. It can be used untwisted, but twisting it up, rolling it just even one ply like that will add considerable to its strength. Now, all animals have tendon, which is sinew, which is a very tough, durable cordage. It's one of the strongest natural fibers that you can find in nature. Sometimes it takes a certain amount of preparation to get these fibers ready. The piece you're looking at is a leg tendon off of a white-tailed deer, And what needs to be done to prepare that, it's a real hard knot, is you have to pound it. It takes a considerable amount of work to separate these fibers out. But when you do so, you end up with a bundle of really, really clean threads. And they're strong. You can use them for many, many projects. Now also, longer than the legs tendon are the back strap tendons. Each deer or mammal has two of these, one on either side of the backbone. This is illustrated in the book Brain Tan Buckskin, which comes with this video. It's also illustrated well in our book number 6, Field to Freezer. And removing it is simple. You just need to know how to do it. It lies on top of the loin, or the outside loin of the animals, and most hunters are afraid that you're going to ruin their meat by taking this off, where actually you improve it. Now, to obtain your threads, you need simply with this is manipulate it somewhat between your fingers, and you can see the fibers appearing. And you can strip out whatever you need for sewing, or if you're going to make a bowstring or whatnot. These are some of the fibers that have already been stripped out. It takes just seconds to clean up a strip of sinew. Okay, now we've prepared a lot of fibers, both plant and animal, and they can be used individually as threads or just wrapped around as lashings. But what we're going to show you next is how to actually make string and rope from these fibers that you've just been able to go out and pick in your backyard. The process of cording. Okay, now we're going to start to cord. Well, if there's any magic to this, this is it. Okay, now Jerry has this bundle of threads from one of the plants that we've separated out. Now if you notice, the end on the right side comes to an abrupt halt, a clump. So what she's going to do is divide it into 3 semi-equal bundles. And the purpose for doing that is so that when we go to splice in later, we have more of a tapering end. Because in order to make cord longer, you can make cord as long as that may be, but that's generally not as long as you want it. And so to make it as long as you want it, you have to add more in. You have to splice as you go. So we'll cover that as we go. Now the very basics of cording is simply twisting. Notice she's twisting tightly clockwise. It could be either direction. Holding her fingers an inch or 2 apart, and then she pushes them together. Now, note, hold that a second, Jerry. Note what's happened. It's just curled up and back on itself. Okay, now hold that out so everybody can see it in the left hand, as if you're recording. So what you have now are 2 bundles of threads, which you can't see very good because Jerry's hand's in the way. There you go. You have a top layer of threads and a bottom layer of threads. So we'll talk with top and bottom. Well, the top will become the bottom as we go. She's going to work with the top. She's going to twist it tight, clockwise, to the right. And now, watch how she twists that over the other. And now the top has become the bottom. Now she'll twist the top one again, tight, spin it over the other, and you are making cord, making string. So repeat that process a few times here. Notice it's, now we're talking for a right-handed person. If you're left, you're going to have to adjust accordingly. Twisting really tight. Now watch when she lets go. You can let go of the whole thing and it will stay together. That means that it's been corded. Now hold that there and I'll zoom in on it. If that wasn't done properly, it would come apart. But it's been done right, so it stays together. And now she'll continue on. Now what you're seeing is exactly what you would be seeing in your hand. Now the left hand, the thumb and fingers, move forward. Every time she takes that little twist, she's created one more little kink in that string. And so she moves that pinch forward. She twists the top one. Always she twists the top. You could do this completely different. You could twist the bottom and turn it the opposite direction. It could still work. What you have to do is twist your individual bundles in one direction and twist that in the opposite direction over the other bundle to create one. And it's the stress of the strings pulling in opposite directions which holds it together. This is what makes the ropes that you buy at the store. Now she'll continue going along until she hits a point where the threads begin to thin out on either of the bundles. And then if she reaches that point, she'll add more fibers in. Looks like she's ready. Now the more often you splice, smaller splices more often will make a stronger product than just a few heavy splices. Now watch how she's going to lay this across. You've got a Y where the two bundles of fibers came down from the cord she's working on. And so she's going to bring the new bundle up into that Y on one side and twist it tight. And then she'll twist it over. And now she's brought the remaining threads that were left over down on that side. And she's going to twist those in to that cord. So the splice is completed right there. That's all there is to splicing. You just continue on in this manner until you've made several hundred feet of string. And then you can 3-ply that back on itself and have one heck of a rope. Not many people have made over 10 or 15 or 20 feet of cord by hand. Now she's splicing in again. This is a good close-up of it. Now this can be a tedious way of cording. You do several hundred feet of this stuff and you're going to have strong fingers. We have bags in the house that came from New Guinea and South America where they must have close to a mile of cord in one bag. They don't do it all this way. Now we showed sinew here just shortly ago. It works the same cording as other fibers do, but there are a few tricks, especially if you're making a bowstring. So what I want to do is show you some of what we do. Now this is backstrap sinew. You have two on each animal, one on either side of its backbone. To prepare these fibers, all you need to do is manipulate it between your hands. Notice there's excess membrane that's on there. We don't want that in our finished product. Now we're going to show you bowstring stuff here because our room, or on our tape for the bow, tape number 3 in the series, we completely ran out of time and we just barely mentioned strings in there, and we refer them all back to tape number 2 on cordage. So we'll show you the actual making of a bowstring. Okay, now you see the fibers are pretty well separated out there. Still got membrane attached to it. Well, I'll peel off this excess membrane before we continue. Okay, just taking a few seconds here to strip off this membrane that was on there. You see we have nothing but fibers left, nothing but threads. Well, I like to go through tail ends, strip them out, make sure there's no real stiff spots. Sometimes you get hunks of meat or just real thick spots of sinew. They seem to clump, and they'll create a problem when you get to cording in. They'll add hard spot. I've got a few right along the very tip here, so what I'll do is take a scissor, knife, whatever, trim off the very tip. If it opens up and it gets the fibers exposed good, it gets rid of any of those little chunks of meat or hard spots of sinew. You don't want that in a smooth string. Alright, that feels pretty good. Now, you can cord this way. The thing with sinew is it stretches. That's why you can use it on backs of bows and for a lot of other things. But we want to wet this slightly. I work with it not real wet, but damp. And as I dampen this, what I do is I just run it real quick like through water. It doesn't take much at all. Let the threads absorb a little moisture. They'll become, maybe a little tacky, but there's a glue action in the sinew which causes this. Right now, these are damp fibers now. In fact, they're almost wet. And this is the shape I like to work in. As they dry down, and then as they do dry, I'll re-dampen them. Now, the secret of bow making, well, for any good cordage, but especially for bow string making, is a lot of little splices. So you notice I'm grabbing the sinew basically in the middle. Okay. And I'm stripping threads out from the middle to the end because one end is thicker than the other. There's more threads here than there is at the other end. And so if I grab at small end and pull towards the top, I'll shred backwards. If I grab at the top and pull down, I'll diminish in size, but I like to grab towards the middle because that gives me the average thickness of the thread that I'll be working with. Grab the bundle and then separate my thread. It's a little short, we'll lay it aside, we may want it later. Okay, I'm going to show you for bowstring making how to start with a loop at one end. As mentioned in the bow tape, I usually just tie, for most of my strings, I just tie a knot, bowline knot, at one end of the bowstring. What I'm doing is I'm not using big clumps of fibers. I'm going in and separating these down and using small bunches. Okay, let me remove the unseparated fibers, just the clean ones. Now here's where I've begun. That's what I'm going to do. I'm going to make two of these. This is for our loop. Now you'll notice, hold this out, that where this ends, the cording ends, fibers go on down, they stagger. There's no abrupt ending. That's true on both ends. What we have here is going to be half of my loop. So this is for a small bowstring. Now what I'm going to do is where these come together like this, is I'm going to take these two ends and start cording in here. So what I've done is made a piece of cord here that is the loop for my bowstring. So for a little bit here, an inch or so, I'm going to have thicker fibers than I do here. Well, let me twist this up. And you'll notice when I get to working, I do a lot of leg rolling. We'll cover that here. I believe next on this tape we'll cover that. Now it's a little thicker right in here than here and where my bowstring is going to be. But that's an unavoidable point. And as this tapers off, gets thinner, what is going to add my strength to this string will be many, many splices of small threads. Now I'm getting here in my right hand, the right hand side of your screen here, approximately the same thickness I have at my loop. Now this would be a lighter weight bowstring. It wouldn't be for one of my cannons. Okay, now I feel my upper bundle of threads is thinner than my lower. So at that point, I'm going to strip out a thread. I'm going to lay that in. I always splice the same thick end and thin end. I let the thin end run down the string and I splice at my thick end. That's how I lay that across, just like Jerry showed you splicing here a little bit ago. Now I roll that tight, bring that over. Okay, Now here's my splice in piece, which I'll roll up tight. And now that particular thread is spliced already. So let me continue for just a short until I feel I need it again. Splicing in this way, you don't have too much hanging out like these little threads here. They're not disagreeable. Okay, well, time for another splice on this one. Reach over here to my bundle of threads, reach in, pull me, it's a little bit thick possibly, but it'll do the job. Lay that across where I'm going to splice. Splice it in. Bring my loose end over to the opposite side. Splice it in. Okay, it's almost time for another one. Sometimes when I feel both of them getting a little thin, what I'll do is take a thread and split it at the middle and add an equal amount to both of my upper and my lower. Twisting this pretty tight. The tighter you compress the fibers in cordage, the tighter you twist it, the stronger you're going to make this. There's our beginning. Just hanging down right so you can see it a little bit better. And we'll just continue on until we get whatever length that we're after for a bowstring. Now here, what I'm doing is I'm laying in my last splice. It's the end of my string. So I staggered my splices down. So that the end of my string pretty much ends the same diameter as the rest of it. It doesn't always work that nice. Now this end of my string is going to be longer than my bow, which I've measured. I'll show you that in a moment. So I don't have to worry about it being quite as critical, but I like my strings to be good. Let's end it off here. A typical question from many, many people is, John, how do you end off your string? Well, I don't know if it's any string you ever bought at the store. If you cut it, it ends like this. All we do is tie a knot. And that holds it. Okay, now sinew needs to be, it's been made, I'll roll it up here so you can see some of this. I've already pre-measured it to the bow, so it must be 52 or 3 inches long. And this string is one strip of backstrap sinew in its entirety, one entire strip. Okay, here's the loop we began with, and here's where we end. Now, sinew being used damp, we're going to dry it under tension. Either hang this off a peg and tie a weight of some sort towards the bottom to let it stretch out. That's the most common way we do it. Now you see all these little threads. Now they can be trimmed off with a knife or a scissor, whatever you wish. Now if this was plant fiber cord, you could take and get rid of those little fuzzies by running it over a flame of a candle or a fire. Really easy. You do that with sinew, you're going to just melt your entire string. Okay, so say I've measured to the bow. This is the loop. It fits over one end of the bow. This is what we made it for. It's large enough. I have to be careful to put it in the notch, make sure it's in, it's not off. But it's large enough so when I unstring my bow, that it will slide down as the limb gets wider. This is handy. Alright, let me go to the other end real quick. I've made my string 6 or 8 inches longer than the bow. Okay, it doesn't need to be quite that long. It's stretching. You can see I'm stretching it quite a bit. It'll stretch some as it dries. Okay. I only need it to be about this long, where my fingers are at, in order to have enough room to tie it to the knot as I string it, because the bow is not strung yet. When the bow is strung, actually my string only needs to be about this long. So, what I do at the opposite end of the bow, sometimes I just tie half hitches onto the knot, but another method of making a loop is called a bowline knot. I'm going to show you this real quick and then you can replay it and replay it if you need to catch on. It's really very, very simple once you understand the concept. You make a loop. The loop is not the loop that's going to remain. That loop that you're making here is simply your knot. When you bring the end back and go through the loop, this upper loop is the loop that's going to be left behind. This is the one that will fit over the end of your bow or whatever you're going to tie to. So when we get to working all of a sudden with 2 loops, it does get confusing. Remember, the one you're bringing back, this is the loop you're leaving behind. This is the one you want to size to fit whatever diameter that you need it to be. You can adjust that. Now you start all over. We kink this. You can kink it either direction. Doesn't make any difference. What doesn't make a difference is how we go through this loop, whichever way we kink it. Alright, now I'm going to bring the end back, and my base line comes over the top of my loop. So what I need to do is go through from the top. I'm sizing this to go around my bow. This loop will be sucked up into the knot. This loop will remain. Okay, I go through my hole. I come back around my baseline. And I go back through my hole. That's my knot. And then we snug it up by pulling in all available directions. And that's a bowline. It will not slip in any direction. Now I'm going to retie that for you. One thing about a bowline, and most good knots, is the fact that they're maybe some a little complicated to tie, but they're easy to take apart and they're strong. Okay, I'm going to kink. We're going to talk different about this time. We've got a rabbit. All right, well, let's kink it the opposite way. Okay, A rabbet. The baseline is underneath. Consider the baseline a tree. This is the hole. A rabbit is going to peek its nose up through the hole. There's the loop we're keeping. This is the knot. The rabbit comes through the hole, runs around the tree, all the way around the tree, and then goes back down the hole. And your knot is tied. All you need to do now is cinch it up. That is a bowline. You lift people out of jungles, helicopters, using this knot because it will not slip from any direction. This can fit around your boat. So now all I need to do is stretch this string now and allow it to dry stretched out. Now, the way these South Americans and New Guineans could make miles and miles of cordage was not twisting, is what Jerry was just showing you, but it's because they have what they call a leg roll. Now, the leg roll method that they use is different from the method that Jerry and I use. Now, if you pay pretty close attention to what I'm doing, you can really speed up your cordage making. I'll go real slow on this. You have an upper and a lower as before. What you do is you spin the upper on your leg until it's tight, and then you take a finger from your left hand and hold that so it doesn't untwist. Now my thumb and forefinger are still holding the pinch at the Y. Now I roll my other one, and at times you'll find that it doesn't want to roll on your pant legs. Just lick your hand a little bit, moisten it slightly, and then things will roll really good. Now I've got my lower one rolled tight, but it's too far apart from the upper. So what I'm doing with my fingers of my right hand, I'm going to reach down and grab that upper line of threads, and I'm pinching it against my palm. And I'm going to take my middle finger of my right hand and hold where I've been holding the lower one. Now I can bring the top bundle close to the bottom bundle. They have to be reasonably close together. Then I take my fingertips, and I lay them on the edge of my strip about 2 inches from where the Y is at. Then I can roll both. Both of those get rolled at the same time. See how they're starting to kink? And as they kink up on me, and then I can start twisting my cord. And it runs right on up. Now I'll do one fast and then another slow. Horses think they're hungry. Cording this way is how I've been able to make 200 feet of cord to 3-ply back to make 60 feet of heavier rope. Sometimes it's not as neat, and some say it's not as tight, but this is tight cordage. This is as tight a cord as I can do by the hand pinch method. Now if we have any threads left, we have a bundle here. I'm going to lengthen this for you. And I'm going to show you another method of splicing. And that's just laying equally, splitting that bundle in half and laying it right in the Y. And incorporating an equal amount on each side. Now I'll roll the top, hold it with my finger, roll the bottom, grab the top with my fingers of my right hand. Then I need to release the palm of my right hand from the lower, so I reach back with my finger and hold it, pull the bundles together, put my fingertips on it, and roll together. When it kinks, I can twist it. Now you note my cord got a little bit thicker there because I added in a bundle all by itself. If you do little splices often, you'll end up with much, much stronger cordage. Okay, fastly, I'll see if I can talk about it. Upper bundle up, finger to hold it. Bottom bundle up, bring them together, and then push them. Now remember, this is the way we do it. It's the way we do things. It's not the only way. You'll, by practice, will find your way to do your things. You'll learn what works best for you. And that's what's important. And then you can experiment and begin teaching others.